In the mountains of Afghanistan, there have been many powerful dynasties which have projected their power outwards. The Jirga is a meeting of Afghan chiefs to discuss and resolve issues according to the Afghan way of life, the Afghaniyat, and once there was a Jirga that could have, in another world maybe, forever changed life in Afghanistan and its surroundings. The Zunbils had been exposed to many faiths in their time as rulers in Afghanistan, including Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, and even the ancient Bactrian pantheon. The god of the sun, Zun, is a mysterious deity, and depending on what you read, could be an aspect of Shiva from Hinduism, or related to Zurvan, the time deity of Zurvanite Zoroastrianism, or a member of the long-forgotten Hephthalite Bactrian pantheon. In Crusader Kings 3, Zun is the deity of its own faith, Zunism, and it's a dead faith in 867, except in the heart of one particular ruler. The Vali of Zamindawar, Salih Kurre al-Hujur, the head of a dying family with little future. The Zunbils have, after their conquest by the famous coppersmith Yaqub Laythzadeh al-Safar, been relegated to a curious footnote in history. They've been forced to abandon their god and to pay homage to a trumped-up Persian peasant calling himself Shah and Emir of places to which he has no right. Despite their outward conversion, the Zunbils still secretly do worship Zun, but for fear of facing total extinction, have they spoken the Shahada and eaten at many Eid gatherings. It's important to note that the Zunbils were, only a couple years before the 867 start date, the rulers of Kabulistan and held influence over much of the region. It is a truly recent wound that the Safarid Shah has inflicted on Saleh, and according to the Afghaniyat, revenge has no statute of limitations. Thus, the fight to restore the Zunbils to their place in Afghanistan has begun. Historically, by the year 870, the Safarid Shah will have made the Zunbil lineage extinct, and that eventuality cannot come to pass if Zun is to ever be praised in public again. Also, I should add before we properly start that I recorded this video before coronations came out, so there won't be any of the new coronation stuff in here. However, next video will show some of that stuff off. Sorry about that. In 867, the Zunbil situation is pretty desperate. They at least have their domain around Zamindawar. Thanks to that, they have the privacy to erect hidden Zun shrines, but there's a despair to a shrine for a sun god which can't be exposed to the sun itself. The Zunists worship where the Lord Zun cannot see them. At the very least, as a vassal of the great Safarid warlord in Sistan, the Zunbils are protected from the Shahis and Ghurids, who might otherwise have left them no quarter. Up to now, Salih hadn't looked for a wife, given he was more worried about his immediate future, but seeing that the war with the Muslims has settled into more of a cold war, he got himself betrothed to the daughter of an Indian Amir from Multan. Muhammad Banu Sama is the Punjabi lord of Multan, and perhaps he will come in useful in the future. Unfortunately, the age gap between the betrothed is a real concern even in this time, with Salih in his 40s and his betrothed Punjabi princess Parvati being just 5 years old. Nonetheless, a betrothal is enough to make an alliance. One of the conditions of the Zunbils' vassalization to the Safarids was their conversion to Islam, which served to crush their spirit and prevent any cultist tension in Zabulistan. But before even a few years had passed since that agreement, the Coppersmith spymaster, Ibrahim of Herat, had already discovered the secret Zunist shrines, and thus pushed Salih towards a crossroads. He could either rebuke Zun, who his forefathers had worked so hard to create a kingdom for, or he could risk everything he has and openly defy Allah in the middle of a world with little tolerance for even wrongly thinking Muslims, let alone pagans. Rather than give in and turn his back on his family, Salih redoubled his faith in Zun and simply brought one of his shrines with him to the Qadi that demanded his renunciation of paganism. As an outed Zunist, Salih has a hard life ahead of him, especially when his ally in Multan called on him to help in a war. Salih, a bit duplicitous as he is, accepted the call to arms, but would later write letters explaining his bannermen betrayed him and that no men came to arms for him. Of course, he never sent any calls out because he needs his men at home, ready for the inevitable Muslim backlash against him. To keep himself safe, at least for now, Salih joined his Amir's wars against the Tahirids in the hopes of replacing his religious loyalty to the crown with a secular loyalty. Maybe if the Zunbils can demonstrate that they support Amir Yaqub's cause, he might leave them alone. The problem is that Salih isn't willing to let his troops leave Zamindawar, lest he be caught defenseless against reprisals. Interesting note, by the way, about the character history of the Safarids. Yaqub's father, Layth, is given the Coppersmith epithet, despite the fact that historically it was Yaqub himself who was famous for being a coppersmith peasant that founded the Safarid dynasty. Safar means coppersmith in Arabic, and is a direct reference to the fact that Yaqub himself was a coppersmith before becoming an Ayyar, and eventually Amir. That being said, it's also entirely possible that Yaqub learned coppersmithing from his father, so maybe his father was also a coppersmith, whatever. It's always interesting to see how paradox creates historical characters for whom there is very little historical information. Anyway, in terms of gameplay, my plan is to try and build up with what little stuff I have until I can maybe get enough men to hope to repel the inevitable doom that looms over me. Yaqub is a very skilled martial leader, meaning that I can't just win by, say, acquiring some 25 martial commander who can use the insane advantage bonus to win a fight in good defensive terrain. I'll have to somehow build up my strength, and I hope to maybe have some allies and a county with good defensive buildings. That starts with the acquisition of Bost. Despite Salih's apprehension at letting his army leave Zamindawar, the city of Bost is vulnerable, with the Amir distracted in Khorasan, so Salih marched on the city, itself an important holy site of the Zunists. The city fell easily, and his conquest did not go unnoticed, as it became clear to everyone that the Zunbils had an intent to defy the Amir. After hearing news of his army's success, Salih took a trip to survey Bost and directly coordinate its integration into the Zunbil domain. The local Muslims were hostile towards this pagan takeover, but were more willing to accept an Afghan pagan ruler than a Persian Muslim one. Afghan ties run deep. In particular, Salih stirred up support for him and his dynasty by calling on the Afghaniya tenet of revenge, Badal. The Saffarids had robbed him and his lineage of their prestige, and for that they must be punished. His efforts paid off when the local Afghans of Bost were willing to pay extra taxes to fund the pursuit of justice, and the inspection went well, helping cement Bost as an integral part of the Zunbil domain. Afterwards, Salih used the money to host a lavish feast, which he invited his Amir to. Hospitality is a huge part of Afghan culture, and so Salih was hoping to use that to ingratiate himself to Yaqub. Perhaps, if the two can become friends, then Salih can continue his efforts to build up in order to enact a great betrayal down the line. In July of 874, the Safarid Amir arrived with a procession of guards, both to demonstrate his power to the locals, and to let Salih know that should he be harmed, his honor guard will destroy everything he loves. The feast was tense, but Yaqub and Salih did share some pleasantries discussing their dislike of Arab encroachment into Iranian land and culture. Yaqub mentioned his plans to reinstate Persian as the language of administration in his territory when the time is right, and although Salih speaks Dari Persian, it's important to note that at this period in history, both Persians and Afghans spoke Middle Persian, and that any dialectical differences between them would have been too small to make much difference, which remains today to some extent. Therefore, the reinstatement of Persian as the language of Greater Iran would have been appealing to both sides. Nonetheless, Crusader Kings 3 lists Afghan's language in-game as Scythian, which I think is in reference to Pashto's origin. Of course, Dari and Pashto are both very closely related, but where Dari comes directly from Middle Persian, Pashto descends likely from another Iranian language, maybe Sogdian. You can see via this little language family tree how Pashto and Dari are a bit distant, but Dari sits right next to Persian. Based on the Zunbil's home of Kabul, I'd wager they're Dari speaking, not Pashto, but it doesn't really matter. It's hard for the game to represent a multilinguistic culture like the Afghans, without either splitting Afghan culture into something like Dari and Pashtun maybe, but then they'd be essentially identical cultures with just a language difference, so what's the point, right? Okay, anyway, enough rambling. Basically, the feast gave some opinion boosts with the Amir, but failed to secure friendship. Friends can't fight each other in CK3, so it would have been nice to be friends with Yaqub, preventing him from trying to revoke my titles, but it's alright. We may have to pursue alternative methods. In another world, a murder intent could have seen the famous Coppersmith tyrant's rule ended right then and there, albeit his intrigue is also higher than mine, so it's unlikely it would have worked, and of course, it would be against the Afghaniyat. Despite having so recently visited in May of 875, Yaqub embarked on a grand tour and chose to visit Salih in Zamindawar. Maybe this was a sign their relations were warming up, as the Zunbils welcomed their Amir into the castle to tour the grounds. I chose to willingly show Yaqub some hidden assets of mine to be taxed in return for a hook. I was hoping to use that hook to get something good in our contract, but I forgot that clan contracts are bare bones. I was hoping for a religious exemption or something maybe, but settled for a useless marriage favor. I later learned that the bonus to acceptance for a marriage from a marriage favor is a pittance compared to the minus 1,000 for being the wrong faith. After touring the Zunbil domain for some time, Yaqub left in August that year, taking with him a whole lot of taxes, their willing contribution being a painful but necessary concession to avoid the Amir's punishment. It seemed so, as the Amir refocused himself on further western campaigns, letting the drama at Zamindawar go without punishment. It seems Yaqub was too large a figure to care about some pagans at his frontier, and so, in May of 877, the people of Zamindawar embraced Zunism, putting the faith back on the map for the first time in decades. In celebration, Salih took a trip to the holy site of Bost to make some offerings and praise the sun. He also increased his recruitment of the IRs, knowing that although things seem calm now, that could change at any moment. From here, the next couple of years mostly encompassed the occasional inspection of the royal domain and the buildup of the IR. It's a slow process, but Saleh does intend to one day break free from those that conquered him. The question is how he'll do it. With how talented, loved, and generally powerful Yaqub Safarid is, it's quite clear that Saleh can't win by conventional means. This sort of shaky middle ground of neither hostility nor friendship left Saleh worried and always on edge, but things changed in September of 884. After a long campaign fighting in the west, Yaqub made a visit to Zamindawar, but this time without any guards or anything. It was a personal visit. He sat with Saleh and smiled, albeit no one could see it underneath his mask. Yaqub explained that he's in need of a trustworthy friend that can help him root out Abbasid spies. You see, Saleh, my real foe is the Caliphate of the Arabs out west. Their colonization of Iran is a stain on our culture and history, but the truth is, most of the Persian lords I call subjects would sell me out for an ounce of territory and a daughter of the Caliph. When I look at you, Saleh, I see a man who, and take no offense, sir, has no one. Who will you betray me for? You owe nothing to anyone, and you are one of my greatest enemies. That's why I want you by my side. I intend to embrace the Shiite Ali in the near future, putting me at odds with my own Sunni vassals. Can I count on you? He extended his hand for a handshake, and Saleh took it, knowing very well that he intends to betray the Emir at a moment's notice. Friends it is then, at least for now, as Saleh signed a deal with the devil and became the Coppersmith's confidant. Amazingly, Yaqub appointed Saleh to be the spy master a few years later, to the shock of the court. A heathen in charge of the private affairs of the realm, preposterous, but Yaqub argued that a man with no connection to the Caliph was best for the job of keeping the realm safe. Any vassal that fears a non-Muslim spy master need have no fears unless they themselves are treacherous. It was alongside this announcement that he also professed his conversion to Imami Islam, a form of Shia Islam, and with a nod to Saleh, he ordered him to get started on rooting out the traitors of the realm loyal to the Caliph. Of course, Saleh immediately used his new position to begin a throne-claiming scheme, albeit it's a whole other question to consider how he could possibly enforce such a claim if he were to get one. For that reason, the scheme was quickly abandoned. Now, to be honest here, I really should have gone for a murder scheme right here, but I was thinking that since I'm friends with Yaqub, I want him to live and keep me safe. That was the gameplay reason anyway. In reality, I should have killed him because he's a super talented ruler, and having his realm split among his children would shake the realm up enough that maybe I could fight for independence. Regardless, I like to think that Saleh started to actually want Yaqub's friendship. The Emir is famous, well-loved, and a respected man, and to be given the special privilege of having his back was, in some way, tantalizing. And so, life went on, with Saleh rooting out rebels and working loyally for the Emir. He left his vengeful thoughts behind, finding new purpose in service to the reviver of Persia. He even had his first son, Zahak, in May of 888. Saleh, now in his mid-60s, is a fading man whose harsh vengeance has been softened by the kindness of an old rival. Although he set out to court the Coppersmith, he finds himself courted instead. But he's not gay or anything, it's just platonic love, bro. Anyway, it fell apart when in 889, just a year later, Yaqub kicked Saleh out of the council, and then, the following year, in May of 890, the two became rivals. Now, the game isn't giving me much to go on here with this event, but basically, we've gone from friends to rivals rather suddenly. I'm gonna say it's because someone out there, some informant, God knows who, found Saleh's old plans to claim the throne, and Yaqub, a man with much reason to be paranoid, took this to be a betrayal. After the years of friendship the two enjoyed, it was all undone by some unfulfilled vengeance. It goes to show that if you're going to befriend someone in order to destroy them, don't allow any half measures. For the short term, I'm safe because I'm involved in some wars with the Emir, meaning we're allies, and therefore he can't start revoking my titles. However, that privilege will soon expire as the wars come to an end. Not to mention, Saleh is quite old, and his son is still an infant. Things are not looking good for the Zunbils. Indeed, on May 31st of the year 891, another year later, Saleh passed away, heartbroken by his friend Yaqub's betrayal. To the throne of Zamindawar came Zahak, a mere 3-year-old, with no skills with which to keep the realm together. His rule may be doomed to fail indeed, a portent of the times to come, this death message. Being just 3 years old, Zahak doesn't exactly have a strong idea of what's going on right now, but he and his 3 sisters were ushered away to their rooms by their mother when his father died. A few hours later, after confirming the death of Vali Sila, Zahak's distant cousin, Hormuz, the court tutor at the time, came to tell Zahak that his father was dead and that he's the new lord of Zamindawar and of the Zunbils. Poor Zahak cried and cried, for he loved his father, but before he could cry more, his sisters gave him a hug, and his cousin Hormuz told him he'll need to be strong now, because it's quite likely things are about to go very badly for this family. Hormuz told the 4 siblings to pack anything they might want to keep in case they have to go. He then clarified that it's a near certainty they'll be leaving very soon. Although it might seem counterintuitive, This sudden panic, countered by the stoic calm of his cousin, taught Zahak to be calm and take every disaster just one step at a time. His father is gone, and soon so may too his home, but panic won't help anything. Hormuz encouraged Zahak not to worry and to enjoy his time in the castle while he can, so the boy hosted some playdates with his siblings and other children around the realm. Social interaction is very healthy for the kids, who almost felt like everything was normal even without their father around. Particularly, Naranjan and Zahak got along, becoming good friends in November of 892. It was in August of 894 that the hammer of tyranny came down. An army assembled outside Bost, and a messenger rode out to Zamindawar with a letter from Yaqub. He demands that the Zunbils relinquish their land, and for the Zunbils to leave the emirate. Of course, Zahak was told to decline by his cousin, but everyone knew this was a losing war. "We are fighting for honor now, cousin. There's no pride in this, only politics. We can't be removed from our homes without fighting, or else we might never be able to come back." Hormuz emphasized to Zahak the importance of the family's perception and the need to make Yaqub into a bloodthirsty tyrant. The plan is to one day return. Some 7,000 Safarid men marched on Zamindawar, and Zahak sent out his 1,500 men to defend the castle. The slaughter at Galakhan saw 25 Safarid troops killed, in return for 1,438 dead Zunbil house guards. Only 2 men made it back to the castle at Zamindawar. Their testimony would be the only first-hand account of the battle from the losing side. Obviously, Zahak is doomed, so he was walked out of the castle by his cousin and put in chains by Yaqub himself. The faceless man displayed no emotion in the action, but Zahak could only imagine the depth of the man's evil for betraying his father, who served him so well, and for slaughtering all those men. Zahak stayed in a Safarid prison briefly, while the Qadis of Sistan determined what to do with him. It was determined that Zahak would not be executed, but instead exiled, and forced to renounce Zunism. Well, you know, that's if only CK3's UI would work. One day, guys, this many years old game will display basic information. Zahak accepted, swearing the Shahada just as his father had decades ago, his tongue struggling to pronounce the foreign Arabic words. Yaqub intervened, asking Zahak to swear the Shahada in Persian instead. This would be a great opportunity to reintroduce Persian into the court, really, and so Zahak, after fumbling his way through the Arabic Shahada, once again swore that the Prophet was the last prophet and that Allah was his only God in Persian. Naturally, he kept Zunism in his heart, as did his sisters, and then the family was forced into exile, heading out to Darmashan in the domain of the Ghurids. Life on the road is hard, and Zahak was barred from taking any adults with him. He's a boy with 3 sisters, 1 older, 2 younger, and he has been tasked with restoring the Zunbil legacy. Naturally, he immediately turned to robbery in Herat. It's quite the image, a 7-year-old and his 12-year-old sister are royalty in their own right, sticking up random people in the streets for money, but being underage they are barred from the tavern, and so can't recruit any able-bodied adults to help them in their quest to reclaim Zabulistan. The first adult to join the group was Noshirvan, an Azarika Muslim that seemed to absolutely hate the kids for their Shia faith, but the kids paid him and said that they wanted to take down the Safarids. A shared enemy is enough motivation, and this man is an Afghan. These kids are refugees. The Pashtun code of conduct says he must take care of the refugees, so Noshirvan became the strange caretaker of the children, despite his extremist religious beliefs. The group could share in their persecution in some ways. Another lesson in life hit Zahak the following year, as he was starting to have more success with his robberies of random citizens in Herat. He became patient, learning that, with time, he can achieve what he needs. After being driven out of Herat as a bandit and outlaw, Zahak went to Qarnayn to regale the court there, and this is where the patience and calm of Zahak really comes to fruition. The truth is, this will take a very long time, and Zahak may spend most of his life talking to people, telling his story and looking for support. Some people hear about the slaughter at Galakhan, where only 2 men survived, and they feel for the boy, changing their view on the Coppersmith king of Sistan. Others see cowardice and tell the boy to try harder next time. To get upset at these heartless people would do nothing, so Zahak became an enigmatic child, seemingly wise beyond his years. Especially when seeing his choice of travel companion, this insane fundamentalist Noshirvan, Zahak and his entourage of sisters starting to become a roving camp of weirdos. Nonetheless, their story is always the same. They were wrongfully deposed and the Safarids are tyrants. Repeat it enough and the little donations will add up. While in Qarnayn, Noshirvan got married to a local girl, Nazila, who had been trying to convince the local lord to fund an expedition to find a legendary sword. Noshirvan, taken by her looks, got the money together, mostly from Zahak's stash of donations, to fund her trip to Arabia, where she said she'd return with something great one day. Zahak suspected this Nazila was a con artist, and he had little respect for her. He vowed to be unlike her and to be honest in life. He does not bend the truth of the events at Zamindawar, nor does he trick anyone into giving donations for his cause. He tells it how it is, and with that, the 12-year-old boy is shaped, at least mostly, into the man he'll soon become. Calm, patient, and honest. He's exactly what the Zunbils need. His elder sister, Naranjan, grew up to be a bit different. She turned 16 in July of 900, and she's more of a I'll get what I want when I want type of person. A healthy contrast to Zahak's infinite patience, Naranjan is arbitrary, sadistic, and shy. She's honestly sociopathic, as she has a sort of hate for humanity spurred on by her dislike for life on the run. She once had dreams of being a princess, but now she robs people on the streets and begs for money from lords that don't care. The group finally left Karanain in December that year and took on new jobs as transporters of goods, people, and messages. Now that at least Naranjan is older, they can start to do more work than just crime or begging. Amazingly, before setting out for a delivery to Tus, Lazilla returned from her trip to Arabia. She was not empty-handed, as she handed Zahak al-Saif al-Khas, which I can't find any information about online. A saif is a curved sword, and khas is an Arabic word which I can best translate to something like special or unique. What the hell is this thing? I don't know, it's cool I guess. It's a pedestal item so I can't use it, but yeah, a random stranger took the kid's money and actually came back with something unique. From here, we enter the more uneventful part of landless gameplay. Don't get me wrong, I like landless gameplay, but sometimes you just need to sit down and make money. Zahak moved to Bamiyan in the Afghan mountains and got to work just making money. It's a slow process and one mostly dependent on getting the right contracts to pop up. In the meantime, let's have a look at the world. The year is 901, and a new Shia Imam has been declared in Mesopotamia. It seems Shia Islam is doing very well, although don't be fooled, the Shia Imam is a vassal of the Arabian emperor who is not the caliph. The caliph rules from Damascus, and it seems like the current emperor is mediating between Shia and Sunni by allowing both religious leaders to coexist. Very interesting idea. Looking over at Europe, things are kind of crazy. A massive West Slav empire has risen under the great conqueror Siemowit the Hammer, a Slavic pagan of the Piast family. This is the son of the historical Siemowit that starts off in Poland in the state. He's rather appropriately a scourge of the gods. To the south, the Arpads rule strongly in Hungary, although they're quite weak militarily compared to the West Slavs. In response to the invading Slavs, Maribold the Lion, a Saxon peasant, has risen up, although he seems to be failing to hold off the pagan armies. The Holy Roman Emperor is a child that rules only Burgundy, Frisia, and Lotharingia. England also seems to be losing to the pagans, as the Danelaw under Halfdan Whiteshirt's grandson is making huge gains. North Africa and Iberia don't have any obvious hegemons, although the Idrisids are doing well. In West Africa, the Orisons of Yoruba land have carved a kingdom out for themselves under the conqueror Ila One Hand. He's pretty old though, so we'll see how long his kingdom lasts. Off in India, there's nothing too unusual going on. The Pala dynasty is doing very well, as always. The steppes see the continued dominance of the Kyrgyz Khanate and the formation of a Mongol confederation out near Lake Baikal. Certainly some interesting stuff, but outside of the West Slavic Empire, nothing too crazy. Back to Zahak, he came of age in May of 904, turning 16 and becoming a steward of middling skill. He didn't exactly get much of an education, making even this outcome something to be grateful for. As his sisters grow up, he'll have some support to shore up his weaknesses, and this group of outcasts might just get rich working for the lords of Afghanistan and India. In the meantime, news of Yaqub the Coppersmith's death reached the camp in December of 905. He died peacefully, it seems, as an old man, but Zahak celebrated his cunning at the news. It seems before his death, Yaqub became known as the Butcher, likely in reference to the massacre of the Zunbil army. So far, the plan is working perfectly. Zahak is the refugee of Yaqub the Butcher, and he seeks his throne. It's a perfect story to sell to some kind of lord with too much money and men. Nonetheless, the time will come. For now, there's much more work to be done. Let's do a little time skip here and highlight some important events along the way. First off, while on the job in Khorasan, Naranjan and Perinaz both died while traveling a treacherous mountain trail in Afghanistan. Despite being Afghans themselves, everyone here is still pretty young and inexperienced. Rest in peace, Naranjan the Evil and Perinaz. To cheer Zahak up, Noshirwan hooked him up with Yagana, a fellow Azarika Tajik girl from the local tavern. Zahak has a wife now, and she's actually pretty skilled, so she's useful to the camp. She's also cynical, making her a little less hateful of Zahak than Noshirvan was at first, although the man has warmed up to the ragtag camp over time. Zahak had his first son, Ayub, in June of 909, meaning the Zunbil lineage will continue. The group then traveled to Bost, where Zahak got to work for the locals to build up some trust and remind them of their true lord. The people here have forgotten Zun, having been proselytized by the Muslims, but they will return to the fold one day. Being a man of significant travels by 914, Zahak wrote a book detailing the beauty of Afghanistan, Khorasan, and the Indus Valley, which he called The Travels of Zahak Zunbil. It featured a summary of all the work he's done so far, and warnings about the potential for death on the mountain trails of the Afghan mountains. He dedicated the book to his sisters, Naranjan and Perinaz. Curiously, he then took a Hajj to Mecca in December that year. It's more of an excuse to see the Middle East, as Zahak took a ton of detours around the beautiful places of Arabia and the Levant. I'm doing this because of that one stewardship perk that gives money for each point of interest you visit. You can get very rich doing this. From there, Zahak moved to Delhi in 920. He enjoyed his time in his traditional homeland, but work dried up and he feared that some Safarid constable might recognize him soon, so he escaped to India. Just like the trip to Arabia, Zahak took a long trip down to Sri Lanka and around the points of interest in India, learning much from the locals about life and other things. He didn't really find much more work in India though, so he came back to Zabulistan in 923, where he continued working until finally, in the year 931, now a man in his mid-30s, Zahak was ready. He amassed enough support via payment from work and donations from sympathizers, alongside the support of the local Afghan people, to take his revenge. He declared a war to seize Sistan from the Safarid lineage, for the Afghan people and for the Zunbils. This is Zahak, now called the Wolf, in July of 931. He's still outwardly Muslim, but he'll be embracing Zunism soon after defeating the Safarids. For now, he needs the support of the local Muslim people. It took a long time, and over the past decade, Zahak learned to hunt, to heal, to party, to build, and to brew. He had the scars to show for it, and he's a hell of a figure. Ironically, he has more or less emulated the rise to power of his father's friend to rival Yaqub Safarid. Yaqub was dirt poor, and through pure grit and hard work became a great Amir. Zahak is about to do the same. You'd think he'd be overjoyed, or angry, or anything really with regards to his plans coming to fruition, but in truth, his vengeance is one of pure duty. He owes it to his family name to destroy these Safarids, and he simply did what he needed to do. There is neither joy nor celebration here, just a cold vengeance designed to be effective. The Safarids in this war were too distracted to respond until Zahak had already occupied Bost and Zaranj, but while sieging Rudbar, the Safarids did arrive. A great battle is coming. In October of 933, the armies met on the field, and Zahak's forces, motivated by their desire to be ruled by a proper Afghan lord and their devotion to the Zunbil cause, fought mercilessly. The battle ended with victory, albeit not a total slaughter. Thus, the army moved on to siege Farah. Zahak had a seizure after the battle though, and awoke claiming to have seen the sun. Its warm embrace took him, and he knew that with the power of Zun within him, he could never lose the war. Zahak won his second battle at Khanasin in July of 934. After retaking Rudbar and winning another battle in the mountains of Bandan, Zahak declared victory, liberating Sistan for the Afghan Zunbils. "We are free," he declared. With a huge coffer of cash, some new land and a new spirit to possess and guide him, he's ready to restore the Zunbil dynasty and Zun's role in it. After embracing the true faith of Zunism, most of Zahak's vassals did not convert with him, so he got to work revoking their titles. One such vassal was Shahzada Aurang, a grandson of Yaqub the Coppersmith and brother of the current Safarid Amir. Naturally, he would face a sun trial in place of his grandfather to determine if the Safarids are indeed guilty of committing crimes against the Zunbils. Of course, the Lord Zun found the correct judgment and left Aurang dead in the deserts of Zaranj. Although vengeance is not yet complete, this is an important step in retroactively punishing the Safarids for their crimes. While the treacherous Coppersmith may have gotten away with a peaceful death, his family will not. It might sound like Zahak is about to go on some conquest spree, but don't forget his patient nature. Instead, it's time to build Sistan into the new home of the Zunbils. Bost is an important holy city of the Zunists, and so it will be turned into a metropolis which will fund the creation of a proper Sun kingdom. Along with that comes the protector of the Zunist holy site legend, which is a mythical tale of Zahak's connection to Zun and his eternal oath to protect the city of Bost and its shrines. He once lost the city, and he's promised never to lose it again. From here, Zahak went about renaming some of the cities that the Safarids have conquered. The city of Farah he renamed to Pashtun, which is named after a channel member. I haven't actually done a video on CK3 using my channel members for renaming inspirations, so as this video plays, if you're a member or want to be one, think about what sort of things you'd like to see. This video features a few examples of using channel member names for renaming things, and you'll see what they are as we go. As a general rule, I don't intend to just directly implant member names into the game, but instead to sort of localize them in a sense, to make sense. Gukalpstan is named after Gukalp Chitinkaya, one of our members, but in order to make a place name, I just added Stan to it. It could have also maybe worked as Gukalp Kalai, a Pashto word for village. Anyway, I renamed Nih to Alexandria after Alexander the Greatest, another channel member, and from there, I'll name other stuff later as opportunities come up. Here's Zahak himself as of September of 937. We can see that he's a very talented character, and the current heir is Eskandar. You might be thinking about what happened to Ayub, and he will be the heir, don't worry. What's happening is that I put Ayub as my diviner, the Zunist court chaplain, and that makes him a member of the clergy, therefore he can't inherit titles. I'll be sure to remove him from that position before Zahak's death so he can inherit. I'm thinking about where to expand, and obviously I want my holy sites in Kabul and Multan, but looking at the political landscape, I realize that I'm the little fish, waiting to be eaten up either by the Nuhid Tajiks in the north, the Arabs in the west, or the Sindhis along the Indus. Rather than consider the difficulty of that situation, I looked west and checked in on Europe. West Slavia continues to dominate in the east of Europe, but England defeated the Danelaw, it seems. Congratulations, Christians, on your one victory. Check out the union of Ireland and Sweden, by the way, under a Norse-Gael conqueror, Alfgeir of the Ivaring House. Beyond that, things aren't too different compared to last check-in. Zahak continued to develop his realm and spread the true faith to the errant Muslims of Sistan. He hunted, he feasted, he built farms, and assembled men-at-arms, all in preparation for an eventual push-out to expand his realm. His dedication to maintaining Afghan culture and keeping himself isolated from outside influences led the culture to embracing the staunch traditionalist tradition. I'm picking this as a representation of the Zunbils' experiences being conquered by foreigners and their dedication to Zun. Despite having not even leveled up the legend once, I finished it in June of 947 just because it was kind of expensive and not worth keeping. I got lucky and was able to make a legendary building, so I went with a legendary shrine. If I can get it built quickly enough, it'll help keep Zahak alive a little longer. Afterwards, Zahak declared his first war to reclaim Zamindawar, his family's recent home. The Amir of Kabulistan is really only an Amir in name, so the war was quite quick and easy. He continued his victorious momentum into a war against the Saffarids for Kohistan, which is in the opposite direction of all the holy sites he wants to get to, but it's land, and right now, the Zunbil kingdom needs more land no matter where. Although the Saffarids were stronger than Kabulistan, they were still no match and easily fell. It seems without a great commander to guide them, the Persians are no match for the Afghans. Despite these victories, a new opponent appeared around Nishapur, just to the north of Kohistan. This is Atabey Bayezid Seljuk, and he makes Yaqub Safarid look like a weakling. By the way, I took another peek at Europe and saw that the Christian victory in England was little in comparison to the conquests of Nasir ibn Gabriel. You know, let me know how you guys feel about these Scourge of the Gods conquerors. Personally, I like having them around to shake things up a ton, but I totally understand how sometimes they can create a little too much chaos. But yeah, the Zaidi Idrisids have completely overrun Western Europe, and I imagine they will continue to expand without a centralized Catholic resistance. In March of 956, the Seljuk warlord began his invasion of the Zunbil domain, looking to take Kohistan, and given how peripheral that land is to Zahak, it's not too bad if he loses. This war is not one he expects to win, but instead is one he will use to size up the Seljuks and get an idea of exactly how screwed he really is in the face of another legendary warrior. At the Battle of Qain, the answer revealed itself to be somewhere in between completely and utterly. Rather than waste the lives of his men, Zahak surrendered and hoped to find some kind of solution to the Seljuk problem in the near future during their truce. He then received a letter that 2 orphans would be paying him a visit soon, as the Seljuks had utterly devastated Kohistan. The siblings Persian and Daoud appeared at court, starving and afraid of what might become of them without help. This event is actually one caused by another event where a Turkic guy grazed some land in one of my counties. I didn't think much of it at the time, but Zahak, well, he sees an opportunity. The Turkic nomad, whose horses were responsible for these kids becoming orphans, is Bozan Lakhnauti, and as a Turk, he knows the ways of the Seljuks. Therefore, he might just be what the realm needs to fight them off. Feeling compassion for the orphans, Zahak took them in, and he really did take them in, more or less adopting them. He got Persian married to his grandson, Zahak Jr. Any Dari or Pashto speakers, how would I say Zahak Jr. in one of those languages? I'd be super curious to know. He got Daoud married to his granddaughter Shenge. These kids have seen hell, and for that, they have become strong. I got another event about the Turkic settlers, this time about a stray arrow taking out someone's eye. I decided to ban all horseback archery in the realm, which is a funny idea, if you ask me. It was of course my own granddaughter Shenge that lost her eye, which kinda sucks, but also isn't really that bad. Another event came in, this time about protecting the Silk Road from raiders, which Bozan managed to pull off very nicely. After having served me so well, the event chain concluded with Bozan asking for some land. Normally, I'd just hand wave him away and move on, but you know, I think these Turkic settlers could be quite useful to me. I put him up in Zamindawar, which is among my less important counties for the time being, and in return, my dynasty gets 150 years of cheap cavalry. Of course, I don't use any cavalry, nor can I recruit any horse archers to make use of this modifier, so it's effectively useless. But it's fun, I guess. Of course, Bozan got his land under the conditions that he become Zunist, which he did, and then I gave him a directive to start spreading his culture in Zamindawar. In terms of why Zahak would do this despite his staunch traditionalism as an Afghan, I think it's a pragmatic choice. There's something to be said for showing respect to the Turks, whose power might otherwise wipe the nascent Zunbil Sun Kingdom out. The other possible answer to the Seljuk menace is to outpace them, which Zahak did by invading Sindh. The region of Bukhar is a rich farming zone along the Indus, and although the Hibaris are a powerful family there, the will to fight encapsulated by Zun's warriors is far greater. This war was pretty easy, as the Zunbil soldiers were veterans of the many difficult wars, and they were well equipped with the money flowing in from the Zunist peasantry. After splitting Multan off from the rest of the Hibari family, the vassals there declared independence, and with that lost their protections. Zahak invaded Multan in the name of Zun and conquered it with ease. Multan, as a holy site of Zunism, is a conquest of critical importance, and was a great victory for the Zunbils. With the rest of Multan acquired, the Zunbil Emirate is starting to look a little more like a proper Shahdom or Sultanate, one which might stand up to the Turks and Persians of the north and west. The Seljuks focus on their conquests west, thankfully, letting the Zunbils breathe, but the Nuhid Tajiks are barreling into India, making immense conquests and conversions. They also control the holy site of Kabul, meaning the last holy site is far from Zunist reach. The other option is Nishapur, the center of Seljuk power, unthinkable. Beyond that, the Zunists do also revere the heat of Cairo, as the unmatched splendor of Egypt is beyond dispute, but is far away and ruled by the powerful Tulanid house. Rather than focus on what cannot be done, Zahak focused on what could be done. Thus, he declared a new kingdom, one which stood as an independent fixture between the influences of India, Arabia, and Persia. The Zunbil kingdom, based in Sistan, is a kingdom ruling over Multan, Bukhar, Sistan, and Zabulistan. You'd think a kingdom like this with many cultures in its borders would be highly cosmopolitan, but in truth, the Afghan way of life dominates here, and Afghan settlers have already started making their way to the great cities along the Indus River. This kingdom is one made by Afghans, for Afghans, with the only properly tolerated minority community being the growing Turkic population of Zamindawar. Shortly after announcing his kingdom, Zahak felt his body failing him. Zun is eternal, but his servants are not. In June of 967, Zahak knew he had just 1 year left to establish enough power for his heirs to rule. A man just entering his 80s though, he had no more to give. The last year of his life saw nothing more than ordering some missionaries around and settling the regular duties of a king. Zahak, the boy in exile who returned to reclaim his birthright, passed away on June 2nd, 968. He ruled for 77 years, many of which were in exile. In his place, his son Ayub took the throne, already an old man himself at 58. Ayub is a talented man, but one more focused on the spiritual. He's the perfect leader of the Zunist world, and if he can reclaim a holy site, he might just be the one to formalize the Zunist way of life. Before we start this chapter, I want to say that naming anything related to Afghanistan the Graveyard of Empires is kind of cringe, but I assure you now that what happens in this chapter does indeed make the name appropriate even if it weren't Afghanistan. Anyway, the new Shah is Ayub, and he comes in with an interesting set of traits. He's compassionate and brave, but also diligent. He is the classic example of a chivalrous king, and he's something of a Renaissance man, before the Renaissance has even happened. He's got experience as a doctor, and he's into hiking. Unfortunately, he smokes a little too much weed and gives money away a little too willingly, but he's the perfect dating profile, really. The moment he comes to power, his dedication to Zun shines immediately, as his quest to control Kabul became the realm's priority. Ayub first needs to conquer the rest of Zabulistan, just south of Kabul, and so the war began. The Tajiks are completely bankrupt and seem to be on their way to self-destruction as their realm was being mismanaged, all the better for the Zunbils. In May of 969, Ayub did have a son, Darok, a miracle given how old he is, and I want to mention that Darok is named after a channel member, but indirectly. I took the name D-Rock from one of the channel members and localized it into something that feels like it could be a name. I want to be clear that I do not believe this is a real name, and I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, that sounds foreign enough to pass for Afghan. I instead want to say that it sounded sort of like a name and resembled D-Rock's name enough that I put it in. I don't want to just drop someone with a preposterous non-name into roleplay stories, but I still want to name characters after channel members, so let this be a happy compromise. Again, members and prospective members, consider leaving opinions below. Anyway, Ayub already had a few sons, but one is a member of the clergy and so is ineligible, and the other is the current diviner, making him temporarily ineligible. Depending on how Darok develops, we may let him inherit, or try to finagle our way into an older son inheriting. I like to play young characters so that they have their time to shine, so I tend to prefer the younger sons to inherit, but I also want to avoid playing an infant. We'll see what happens, perhaps fate will take over. The war for Zabulistan ended with a climactic battle in Sharwan, where the Zunbils took a huge victory and ended the war. I granted the rest of the duchy to Bozan, our trusty Turkish ally, before challenging him to a chivalrous sparring duel, Ayyub may be old, but he understands they must become well acquainted with the way the Turks fight if he wants to hold off the Seljuks, who may or may not be coming for his realm in the near future. The duel was tough, but Bozan, also an old man, was defeated, giving both men a positive modifier on account of their chivalrous practice duel. In April of 971, I made an accolade which I'd neglected to do before, and I named it the Magic Vanguard Ramen. And this is a very lazy name, again taken from the channel member Magic Ramen. So I thought magic was appropriate because the guy I put in for the accolade is Rajput, and as a Rajasthani, he has the Khadga Puja cultural tradition. Puja in Indian culture is like a rite or a prayer, you could say. Khadga is a weapon, and I like to think that the Zunists watching these foreigners doing prayers and mantras with their swords would essentially just be magic. The ramen part of the name, yeah, I had no idea how to incorporate that nicely, so Ra-men. Ra as in the sun god, and men because that's the second syllable of the name. Forgive, oh dear channel members. We were talking about the Seljuks earlier, and having a look at their current emperor, we see that Bayezid, now the Lionheart, is still below 50, and he is immensely powerful. Alongside his individual strengths, he has alliances across the nomadic Turkic world which are very threatening, and he has yet more land to the west to consume. Ayyub took his wife on a hike to Zamindawar to get his mind off of the stress of simply existing next to that existential threat. His wife was sick, by the way, but he insisted some fresh air would help her feel better. I don't know if it did help her or not, but Ayyub came home with a huge weight off his shoulders and felt ready to lead the realm once more. He hosted a feast in Multan, but along the way came across some poisonous plants which he mistook for some not-so-poisonous plants. After assuring his guards that the plant was safe, he ate some as a little snack for the road. Not 5 minutes later did he drop dead, a victim of the hostile flora of Afghanistan. I don't know actually, does Afghanistan have a lot of poisonous plants? You tell me. Regardless, both of Ayyub's older sons were dedicated to Zun, and so Darok, the 3-year-old boy, has taken the throne. I wanted to not play as a child, but here we are. Ayyub ruled for only 4 years, and is probably the only ruler of the Zunbils in the past century to have a boring story. Darok is too young to have much to say about, so let's see how he develops. He's got his brother, Zahak Jr., now just Zahak I guess, to help run the realm, as the regent and diviner, although he probably would have been better as the Shah himself. Well, he would have been nice help as a regent, but he instead left the court to stake his own claim out in the world as an adventurer. You know, I bet it would be real fun to experience a side story of Zahak's adventures, but let's not derail the story too much. We'll instead resign Zahak's story to that of your imagination. What do you think we get up to out on the road? Will he eat some plants like his father and die? Maybe fall off a cliff like his great aunts? Darok, being a toddler, didn't do much in the first couple years of his rule, but he did welcome the Turks into Zamindawar, who finally became a cultural majority there. To show them his goodwill, he was advised by his older brothers to rename the city for them as a sign of the long-term nature of this relationship with the Turks. And so, Zamindawar was renamed to Turkmenia, a simple change but one which will foster good relations with the Turks, hopefully. Afterwards, the realm's martial advisors continued the war against the Tajiks, using Ayyub's death as a convenient excuse to void their truce. Darok sat at home, playing with his friends and getting lessons from his tutors. Despite how little fanfare I'm giving the war for Kabul, it's an important war because it is of course a Zunist holy site, and by conquering it, the Nuhid family will also be bisected, making a distinct Khorasani half and an Indian half. The war was won with no input from Darok, but back home in the castle, the boy became a vengeful child, after some random kid spat in his roast swan. It would have been the way of Zahak to grin and bear it, but Zahak isn't here now, and Darok is writing his own history. Later on, Royal Zunbil surveyors found a hoard of Hephthalites treasure out in Bamiyan, which is funny because the Zunbils themselves descend from the Hephthalites. Naturally, Darok chose to keep the treasure for himself, as the stuff looked really cool. Some took this to be a sign of how his rule will be. It was a tyrannical act for a mere child, but at the same time, others held hope that he'd grow out of it. In October of 980, the Afghan settlers assembling along the Indus reached a majority in Multan, turning the city into a proper Afghan settlement. More Afghan culture will spread in good time, but for now it's a nice start. Unfortunately, the small stakes of little Darok's rulership so far came to an end when the Seljuks finally made their move to conquer the east. In April of 981, Bayezid declared war for the total conquest of the Zunbil Shahdom, and he has a whole lot more men, and most of them are on horses, compared to Darok's army of lumbering Ayar. Bayezid is a bit old and may soon pass away, but while he lives, that 41 martial score is terrifying. Nonetheless, Afghanistan's reputation as the graveyard of empires is not one to take lightly, and if Darok can lead this war the right way, he might just live up to the region's reputation. The Seljuks immediately occupied Alexandria and marched on Zaranj and Bost. Darok's men, hoping to exploit the overconfidence of the Seljuks, lined up in Bost and prepared for a massive attack. Thankfully, the Seljuk armies were split up and attacked in small groups. the first of which was slaughtered, leaving behind a war banner. Rather than lord it over the Seljuks and inspire rage in them, the council found it best to burn it and pretend it never happened. There was a peasant uprising in GIGACHAD shortly after, but conveniently the Seljuk army happened to wipe it out for Daruk. How kind. For some reason, the Seljuk army was retreating, and it was hard to tell why at the time, but Bozan's Turkish advisors to the court reminded them that Turks like to feign retreats. Nonetheless, Daruk marched to Alexandria to save the city, during which time GIGACHAD fell, and a massive Turkish army led by Bayezid himself marched through the mountains there to confront him. Daruk's forces held their ground and dug in. They got very lucky that one of Bayezid's lesser commanders took command of the battle, perhaps hoping to gain some prestige of his own, and in so doing, caused the Seljuks to lose the fight. Bayezid's leadership may have been able to turn the tables on the Afghans, but alas, the confused leadership of the Seljuk army was their downfall. Further Turkish reinforcements trickled in to discover a desolate battlefield littered with what they were hoping were Afghan soldiers. They were surprised to see that it was indeed the Seljuk army that had fallen here, and so yet more fell. Somewhere in all the fighting, Bayezid had been slain, as his body was later discovered after looking over the field, and then a most curious correspondence arrived in Zaranj. A letter written in Georgian, as in the Caucasian language from the mountains far to the northwest, came in. After struggling to find a single person that could translate the letter, it was discovered that Bayezid's heir, Ali, was a deeply controversial figure in Persia. He had, for some reason, embraced Georgian culture and plunged the realm into total disarray with his foreign customs. The Seljuks, having abandoned their Turkish ways for some reason, are on track to lose this war and pay an immense reparation. The cost of that reparation may be their doom, as the realm is sure to plunge into chaos. From his experience fighting the Seljuks, Daruk gained two more personality traits: bravery, inherited from his father surely, and impatience. He's proving to be the more valorous but foolhardy half of his grandfather Zahak. However, he is shaping into a proper Shah of his own. The Seljuks sent significantly smaller war parties to try and win against the Zunbils now, and since some of Daruk's Indian allies have arrived, the war is easy now. At the Battle of Rudbar, the Zunbil forces defeated a massive Turkish army, and the victories kept piling on at Alexandria, GIGACHAD, and finally in Doroh, where yet another humiliating defeat saw the Seljuks sign a surrender, and with it, provide an immense war operation. In the chaos, Ali, the Georgian Muslim, died somehow, Daruk never found out why, and in his place, a somehow even more controversial figure came to power. This is Mahmud, the Apostolic Armenian. Yes, the Seljuk Empire is now a Christian Armenian empire. It's the reverse Manzikert, folks. This sultan has no money, no prestige, little legitimacy, and no chance of holding his entirely Muslim empire together. I was going to look further west and talk about how the Zaydis of Europe have collapsed, but then another war came my way. Yet another empire wishes to collapse in the name of paying a war debt to the Afghans, and this time it's the Turco-Mongols of the Are Khanate. The Are culture is a Turkic-speaking Mongol heritage culture, which has become quite popular out in the steppes, and this recently settled nomadic Khan is looking to take over the rich cities of Sistan. Things didn't quite go his way, as Daruk hired a fundamentalist Muslim mercenary band, the Afghan Band of Zaranj, to lead his armies. These Azarika know how to fight, and Captain Behruz has 40 advantage in combat. He led the Zunbil army to an immense victory in Alexandria, where literally thousands of Turkic and Mongolic soldiers were slain. The city of Alexandria is quickly becoming a graveyard more than anything, which is great for the plants, I guess. Daruk came of age shortly after in May of 985, and as a grown man, he's a somewhat competent diplomat. He's nothing too amazing, but competent enough to run the Shahdom surely. In time, he may yet gain the skills he needs to make sure the realm doesn't fall, but for now, his wisdom to hire a skilled commander for his men has paid immense dividends. Literally. Well, not really that immense. The Are Khanate isn't very rich, so their reparations didn't even cover the cost of the mercenaries Daruk hired. In better news, we see that the Seljuks have completely imploded, and a massive power vacuum has opened up. Daruk was advised to get in there and fill that power vacuum before anyone else can, lest another empire of Persia come for them. But Daruk said that the realm needs to heal, and that he's a diplomat. He makes peace, not war. We see a similar effect in the east, as the Indian half of the old Tajik Empire has completely collapsed, and local Indian warlords have risen in their place. Despite his claims of peace, Daruk quickly grew impatient and declared some wars in India to help secure more control of the Indus and Sutlej rivers. He also conquered the region of Gandhara, which will help keep the holy site of Kabul safe from any Tajik raids. At this point, the realm's borders are looking pretty good, and this kingdom of Sistan may soon evolve into an empire. The old settlers of Zabulistan have also been thriving, and although their placement on the map is kind of awkward, it feels like an appropriate concession for their help in the war against the Turks. They get some land, the Zunbils get to continue existing. Seems fair. In December of 996, Daruk had his first son, Shapur, who may very well be the next Shah. Anyway, after conquering those border regions in India, Daruk got complacent. The only enemies he'd known were the Seljuk Turks, the Aray Turco-Mongols, and the Tajiks. All three have been defeated decisively, and now he's ready to sit and simply administer the holy sites in the name of peace. He's brave, but he's no warmonger. Unfortunately, he ignored his advisor's warnings that to the west, a Persian warlord of the Karbalid family is slowly reuniting the Persian people, and that they may soon invade. Looking over the world a bit in the year 1000, we can see that things are weird. The Armenian principalities are in Abkhazia. The Kara-Kerman Norse nomads of Ukraine have many tributaries in the region as well. Africa is looking surprisingly well carved in terms of its borders, but Europe on the other hand is in total disarray after the dissolution of the Idrisids. Nonetheless, echoes of the Maghrebi conquest there are obvious. Much of Francia is Zaidi, and in some cases even Arabic-speaking. Even more weirdly, the Duke of Upper Burgundy, Bolson, is a Norse pagan, despite being Arpatan culturally. Explain that one, bro. The Zaidi faith has spread to many cities across Europe and will probably continue to spread since the local lords are following the faith. The King of Sweden is an Estonian Muslim, and the Luneburgid Emirate has conquered most of Denmark. Off in the west, we see the rise of Pictland, ruled by Muadan the Handsome of the Ivaring House. I'll be honest, I didn't know Scotland would rename to Pictland if a Pict ruled it, but I'm absolutely here for it. Finally, in more local news, we see the Arab conqueror Yukhana, the Shia populace that is uniting Persia. His main rival for now is the Aray Khanate, but given enough time, he might move on to Sistan eventually. Regardless, all the empires that have attempted to invade Sistan have suffered consequences. The question is which of these invaders might eventually succeed in conquering the graveyard of empires. In recent history, Afghanistan, or at least Sistan, has seen a truly immense amount of fighting. The region is littered with the sites of battles, the spoils of war, and the orphans and widows of slain men. Despite his seeming pacifism, the warlords and veterans who claim such immense glory in the field against the rivals of the Zunbils are looking for more war, and so Daruk allowed his men to invade Punjab and Sindh with the hopes of keeping his men well trained and ready for potential wars down the line that might matter more. This worked fine for everyone, as Daruk wanted to enjoy time in his castle without any war issues, and the council wanted more land to provide additional revenues, in fear of Yukhana the Conqueror to the west. The soldiers were all too happy to fight significantly smaller Indian armies and reap the loot and glory of those conflicts. The conquest of Lahore in particular was an especially prestigious acquisition for the empire, as the farmlands there will bring immense revenues to whoever rules them, and by extension, to the Shah. We can see in July of 1006 how much the Afghan culture has expanded into the Indus Valley. There's yet more settlement to be done, but this new land is providing immense prosperity to the Afghans. Meanwhile, back in Zaranj, Daruk was studying up on the old theology of Zunism. It's a mysterious religion with a lot of information to go off of. All of it is orally told and passed along via the diviners, but in recent time, the oral tradition has been falling apart. It's a long process, and a lot of it is work of improvisation, but Daruk got to work writing down the rites, lore, and mythos of Zunism. Obviously, we'll be keeping that very vague because I have no idea what Zunist lore might be in an alternate world where the faith potentially standardized, but, you know, think of something like a chronicle of stories, fables, and parables. It'll take many years to write, and it'll take a lot of research. To achieve that, Daruk took some pilgrimages here and there to Multan, Bost, Kabul, wherever he could find people that might provide some insight into the faith for him. He even took a legendary trip to Cairo in September of 1012, passing by various points of interest across the Near East. He was looking for inspiration from all the faiths of the region, although he often found them uninteresting compared to the potential lore he could create for Zunism. Where there is a gap of information, there is an opportunity to mold the faith into whatever he wants. During his trip, Daruk turned 44, and I know a lot of time has been skipped considering that Daruk was 3 when he took the throne, but that's mostly because I spent the past couple decades simply declaring small wars and just building up prestige and piety. Sometimes, a king's life can indeed actually be boring, and that was by design. Sistan had seen far too much war on its own borders and chose the path of peace for a few decades. This could actually be considered the peak, in a way, of the reformed Zunbil kingdom, especially when considering what may soon come to pass. While on his trip, Daruk was blissfully unaware of Yukhana the Conqueror's invasion of Sistan, which began in October of 1013. Although Yukhana is not as talented as Bayezid, he is still a fearsome figure, and one which may, if he can get the right battles to happen, defeat the Sistani army. I would say that Daruk's pilgrimage got in the way of the Shah being able to defend itself, but in truth, the army was already quite autonomous by this point, and needed little direction from the Shah to operate and defend its borders. The men had practiced their strategies in India, and were ready to defend Sistan once again. The first battle of the war was an ill-chosen one, in the mountains of Doro, where the Zunbil army was soundly defeated, and what's worse, Shahzadeh Shapur was captured in the battle, giving Yukhana immense leverage in the war. In a way though, Darok's absence from the war weakened that leverage, giving Sistan time to breathe and potentially turn the war around. The army gathered itself in Zaranj and prepared for battle in Juain. The battle was a great Zunbil victory, as the terrain was much better suited to the heavy infantry of the Royal Guards. Soon after, under the advice of the Turks of Zabulistan, the Zunbil forces feigned a retreat to pull the Persians into Zaranj for a killing blow. At the Battle of Karanin, the odds were against them, but the Afghan IRs managed a victory thanks to the overzealous charges of the Persians, who indeed fell for the classic feigned retreat. Meanwhile, Darok was on his way back to Zaranj, looking forward to seeing his prosperous, peaceful realm once more. Little did he know it was fighting for its life right now. A decisive battle saw an immense Zunbil victory in June of 1016 when the Zunbil army took defensive positions in the mountains of Doro, which is quickly becoming the location of many great battles, I must say. Thanks to their positioning and great leadership, nearly the entire Persian army was wiped out, and just in the nick of time, that is to say, way too late, reinforcements from India arrived, assuring victory for the Zunbils. It was shortly after the climactic battle of Doro that Darok passed through the region, and he saw the corpses piled up in the area. Scavengers and peasants hoping to make enough money to last a century picked through the bodies, knowing that Persians loved expensive adornments. They found much loot, and praised the sun for their luck in finding it. It was inspiring to Darok to see his people have such faith. He's ready to write the Zunbil holy text now. He arrived in the castle, dismayed at the capture of his son, but reassured that the war was firmly in their favor despite that. In fact, the Zunbils were ready to make an offensive maneuver and attack the city of Cain before marching up to Baihaq to destroy an assembling Persian army. Victory was declared, and Darok attributed their success to the great leadership of his council, alongside of course the sun and its great blessings of life. Shahzadeh Shapur returned home and carried with him the immense reparations owed to the crown by the boisterous conqueror of Persia. Surely, Sistan will never fall to a foreigner. Hey, check out this Afghan culture spread in January of 1019, by the way. I can't imagine the implications of an Indus Valley with this much Afghan influence, but I think it's super cool. To commemorate the great wars fought on Afghan soil in recent history, Darok had an axe commission which he named Hodder Otter's Axe. Again, sorry, lazy name, but thanks to the channel members for the support. So far I've got cities, artifacts, and characters named after channel members, and again, please do leave your thoughts in the comments on how you want these renamings to be conducted. In October of 1020, Darok finally reformed the faith and unveiled this compilation of Zunist lore. He of course made himself the head of the faith, but he created a faith centered around three major principles, these principles themselves somewhat derived from the Afghaniyat. First, vengeance is important to the Zunists. War and the usage of it to further the goals of the faith are both deeply important. A faith founded in blood has come to welcome it. Second, those who are conquered face a decision. They must either face the sun trial and find Zun's judgment in the here and now, or else convert to the faith and praise Zun in the hopes of being rewarded in the afterlife. And finally, it is the job of all Zunists to bring the light of the sun to the people who live in darkness. Even if it would require them to abandon their material possessions, the Zunists are a people that will preach to anyone at any cost. How this will manifest is essentially a bunch of roving Zunist inquisitors who will drag non-believers out to die in the sun, or else repent and worship it. That is of course shown by the fundamentalist nature of the religion. It shows fundamentalism because it feels appropriate given how persecuted this faith has been so far. After reforming the faith, Darok personally led the first holy war for the sun, and it was against the remaining Sindhis of the Indus estuary. He won the war with ease, and finally drew a total line from the Himalayas of Kashmir down to the Indus estuary. This line is the domain of the Zunbils and their illustrious lineage, and all those who pass through it will learn of the splendor of the sun. Some Muslim populace did try to fight back against their cruel overlords, but of course they were easily defeated by the massive Zunbil army. They were used to fighting the most elite of the Arab, Persian, and Turkish coalitions that had hunted them for so long, so these ragtag peasants had no chance. The wars of Zunist aggression continued into Rajasthan, although they were disrupted by another declaration of war from Yukhana the Conqueror. If he's anything, he's certainly not easily deterred. Unfortunately, the army is stuck fighting in Rajputana, which left Zaranj open to occupation. The war is already almost over before the Zunbil army can even fight back. Unfortunately for the realm, Darok, a commander of middling talent at best, is feeling enough righteous fervor that he wants to lead the army, much to the dismay of his more talented Turkish and Afghan commanders. At the Battle of Lande, though, a miracle occurred which saved the war for the time being. Around 3,000 soldiers simply refused to fight due to the sweltering heat on the field and demanded extra water rations which their commanders could not provide. This disruption in enemy forces gave Daruk enough of a numbers advantage to win a slim victory against a superior enemy force. In terms of why this happened, like gameplay-wise, I actually have no clue. I am unironically stumped at these 2,000 men just not being in the fight. Any ideas, guys? Leave them below. As Daruk reclaimed Zaranj from its occupiers, a plague of typhus swept the area, brought here presumably by the Persians, and with it came immense losses to the army, whose morale and provisions were decimated by the plague. They were defeated just outside Gilgabstan and regrouped to the east, in preparation for a massive battle outside of Bost. The war is in dire straits, and Daruk did indeed relinquish command to his more talented commanders for this fight. Unfortunately, the plague had inflicted too heavy a hit upon the Zunbil army, who were soundly defeated at Bost. The Persians threatened to sack the great temple there, and rather than let Zun's sanctuary be harmed, Daruk surrendered the war. The man who made Afghanistan the graveyard of empires has now turned it into an empire of graves, as the Karbalids of Persia have completely conquered the Shahdom of Sistan, relegating Daruk to what little land he could keep off in Kabul. Truly has disaster struck the realm, as the once prospering Afghan kingdom of Sistan and the Indus is no more, at least for now. It was while settling into Kabul that Daruk explored some of the many cave systems of rural Afghanistan, and he found a wondrous place. A strange blue portal leading to who knows where was sitting in the cave. He and a few of his men looked inside and, bewildered, tried stepping into it. Turns out, the portal had a force of its own and pulled Daruk and his people into it. The very process transformed them into new creatures, and before anything else could happen, Daruk woke up from his dream, or perhaps nightmare, ready to resume his duties as the Shah in exile off in Kabul. In case you're wondering what I'm yapping about here, I actually got inspired by this campaign to go make Daruk and the Zunists into a faction in Age of Wonders 4. I might go make a video about this as a tie-in to this video. We'll see. Let me know what you think of an Age of Wonders 4 video, as that game has been on my radar for some good narrative content of late. Anyway, back to reality. The kingdom is in dire straits. Nonetheless, what cannot be taken away from the Zunbils is that Zunism has been reformed, and in truth, Kabul and its surroundings are pretty rich. Regardless, the kingdom must be restored. Having defeated the rising Zunists of the east, Yukhana the Conqueror declared himself the new Imam of the Imami faith, essentially becoming a caliph of the now massive Shia Muslim world. With that, the creation of the Imami Caliphate has overshadowed the Zunist Reformation, and the only way to outdo the usurper of Sistan will be to do something even greater. The power of any great kingdom may wax and wane as the circumstances change, and Daruk is not someone to give in when times get tough. First, he must secure new revenues to pay for his army here in Kabul. Although he thinks the men should fight for the glory of Zun alone, the truth is they need money for weapons, armor, food, and their families, without which they could never fight at proper strength. Despite his recent failure, Daruk is still the spiritual leader of the faith, and so he consecrated his bloodline in January of 1032. Sure, you could write some false legend about how he never lost a single battle or something, but instead, Daruk took the opportunity to be honest with history when writing his story. He did lose the kingdom at its peak, but his reign will not end with it remaining that way. He has vowed. Interestingly enough, Zunism is still spreading throughout the Indus Valley, which is because when Yukhana took over the kingdom, the vassals stayed there, so all those Zunist Afghans are still spreading the culture and faith. Very cool. While surveying the realm for economic opportunities, Daruk discovered the gold mine of Bamiyan in the north of the county at Panjshir. The extra taxes from it can basically fund the entire court, and thanks to that mine, Daruk may actually be able to fulfill his vows. Hey, check out the spread of Oghuz culture down in Zabulistan, by the way. As of October of 1033, the Turks have a nice little enclave in the mountains, which probably doesn't suit their nomadic way of life very well, but I still think this kind of thing is super cool. I just wish there were some mechanics around recruiting Turks for my army or something, at least if I still held that land anyway. Speaking of Turks, there's a Pecheneg Kugan making waves in the western steppes. Kure the Griffin has 44 martial, holy crap, and he's just an insane character. He's not even a scourge of the gods, just a basic conqueror, and he may actually be the most insane GIGACHAD I've ever seen from the AI. Nonetheless, we must mourn the Karakarman Norsemen, who I assume were absolutely eviscerated by this guy. Despite the hopeless nature of the situation, things looked up when Yukhana died and had his realm split between his sons. Sistan proper is its own kingdom, ruled by some incompetent son of a great man, and with that, Daruk and his immense war chest should be able to begin the conquest of the kingdom. So, I could claim the entire kingdom in one claim war, but then I'd have a bunch of vassals I probably don't want, so I'd rather not. Instead, we'll be dismantling the false Sistan one duchy at a time, starting with getting the Turks of Afghanistan back into the fold. I defeated Amir Kaykhosrau easily, and returned the land of Zabulistan to the Turks, of course. Next, I'll be attacking the main Karbalid realm for Gandhara, The Karbalids are struggling with some internal conflict, so it should be easy to beat them while they're distracted. Thought I'd check in on Europe and show off the amazingly rare Pictavia over here, by the way. Here in June of 1040, High King Artbrand Uab Moadan, a Catholic Pict of the Ivaring family still, yeah, explain that one, pal, has sort of kind of united the Isles. Also, look at his personality, wow. Lazy, craven, and shy. Bro is not well suited to rulership. Anyway, I took Gandhara before the Karbalids could even respond, meaning I won the war with no battles, and the kingdom is slowly coming back together. Daruk attacked Sistan once again in February of 1043, taking back Multan this time, although the city proper is now with the Karbalid realm. That war too was easily won. Multan's hinterlands conquest was soon followed up with the siege of the city proper. The besiegers were careful not to damage any of Zun's shrines, which thankfully had remained unmolested under Persian management. This time the war did have proper combat, as in April of 1046, Daruk personally led his men against the Persians at the Battle of Kashmira. He won decisively, eliminating every soldier in the army and striking an immense blow against the Persians. The reconquest of Multan was a massive victory for the Zunbils, and with it came the confidence to know that Daruk had indeed not ruined the legacy of his family. The campaign across the Indus continued, with Bakar following in the winter of 1048, and then the Indus estuary soon after in March of 1051. It's a bit of an awkwardly shaped kingdom now, but the Zunbils are back to ruling the Indus, at least most of it. There's still of course the riches of Lahore, which Daruk went after. His victories against the heathens that would dare cross Zun stoked such fervor in the people that the will to fight great holy wars consumed the Zunist people. Maybe in the near future will there be a great campaign to bring each and every invader of Sistan before Zun's great sun trial, but for now, the wars are staying small scale to ensure success. Anyway, Lahore's conquest was complete in March of 1053, creating a Zunbil kingdom of similar shape to the Ghaznavid Empire, which did not come to be in this timeline. Checking the religion map mode, we see that Zunism is still completely dominant across the land, and that's likely on account of how shortly the Imamis ruled the land there. There remains just one more conquest to make in Sistan, which is the heartland of the very kingdom's namesake. Bost, Zaranj, Kukulstan, and Alexandria are among the most important cities for the Zunbils in recent history, and they will, with ease, be reconquered. Let this be a lesson to you, that if you have a bad war and lose it all, you can wait for the right moment to get it all back if you're patient in CK3. Of course, it also is wise to just not lose your entire empire, but you know, lessons learned, right? To celebrate the reconquest of Zaranj, the royal capital, the city around the castle was renamed to Daruk Kalai, meaning essentially Daruk's village or something. I don't actually speak Pashto like at all, so I'm hoping that this checks out. Daruk would not make the same mistake he made before, and this time took war to his enemies before they could recover. He conquered Makran in November of 1057 and was considering further conquest, but then realized that he's actually in his 80s and probably will die soon. He's got to do one more great campaign before he passes away to cement his legacy. Daruk declared a great holy war for Khorasan, which contains the holy site of Nishapur, and he's hoping that with the help of the whole Zunist world he can pull out a great victory here. He'd need the war to be over within a year to see his victory, which was quite unlikely, especially after his defeat at the Battle of Sharakt. Daruk, after 87 years of rule, holy crap, died at the age of 90 while marching his men back to Daruk Kalai to regroup. His legacy is one of seeming mixed review, but ultimately total positivity. He brought about the reformation of the realm. He claimed the most land of any Zunbil ruler in history, and proved that the indomitable spirit of the sun cannot be defeated, even in the deepest of darkness. In his place, with huge shoes to fill, is Daruk II, the grandson of Daruk himself. So far, his claim to fame is his valor in the recent Battle of Sharakt, where his army lost, but he fought with honor and took many great warriors down. Beyond that, he's not particularly interesting. His skill set is relatively standard across the board, no weaknesses, no real strengths, but a will to fight and a good soul. His realm was split with his brother and cousin Marwan of Makran, who is significantly less interesting than Daruk II. Being a bit of a deceitful guy, Daruk is breaking his perception as a good soul by doing this, but he will be attempting to murder his brother to reunite the kingdoms. Unfortunately, Daruk II's mediocrity with regards to warfare has led him to a sound defeat at the hands of his Imami enemies, but it's no big deal. There's no big consequence to losing a great holy war besides loss and fervor. The great purification of Khorasan ended in November of 1060 with a Zunist defeat. No matter. In better news, Daruk successfully murdered his brother Marwan in January of 1064, albeit he was caught red-handed and labeled a murderer. Thankfully, when reforming the faith, Daruk I made kinslaying legal, making this once heinous crime no longer a big deal. With the Zunbil kingdom reunited, there remains just one task to cement Zunbil rule for good. It's time to make an empire, but a proper empire must rule more than this pittance of land. A new kingdom to add to the Zunbil domain will be Gujarat, which is itself an extremely rich trade center. The rule of Gujarat is bankrupt somehow, and weak, which makes this war easy pickings. The war ended within just 1 year, to give you an idea of how easy it was, and after completing the war, Daruk made his contribution to the culture that his grandfather couldn't make in time for his death. Afghan culture gained the religious patronage tradition starting in July of 1070. I think this feels appropriate, given how important the grand temples have been to both the economy and the identity of the realm so far. While invading Jabal Qufs in the winter of 1071, I had an interesting but ultimately not particularly effective event. A Manichaean named Narcissus arrived at the court, evading persecution from the Byzantines. And of course, according to the Pashtun tradition of hospitality, I had to take care of this refugee, but he doesn't really do much from what I can tell. I will say that old event chain from earlier in the video about the Turks in my realm was very cool, so more of that sort of thing I'll always encourage, but this Gnostic guy is kind of doing nothing. Sadly, no further events came about from the Gnostic refugee, so either something went wrong, or this guy is underwhelming. By October of 1073, I've got the Zunist faith well spread throughout the realm, with Gujarat being infested with missionaries to try and convert them too. To really cement my power across North India, I invade Haryana and Delhi. I'm doing this because I need more counties to make an empire, but also because it'll serve as a climactic end to the creation of this empire. Delhi is a legendary city, albeit one with very little defenses at this point. The big bads of the campaign have, this time, truly been defeated, making these pithy conquests at the end feel a bit pointless, beyond the value of the land being conquered, I suppose. The last conquest of the campaign after Delhi was Kashmir, simply because it let me get more land without ruining the map aesthetic. Check out the culture spread here in September 1078. We've got Afghan culture deep into Punjab and Sindh by now, and creeping into Rajasthan too. The Turks continue to thrive in Zabulistan as well, our little buddies. After getting some money and piety, I finally formed a new empire in November of 1079. Daruk II isn't the most impressive Shah, nor did he really achieve the whole thing on his own. He owes most of his success to the foundations laid by his grandfather's 87-year reign. However, Daruk II has demonstrated that he can complete what has been given to him. The new empire of Afghanistan, ruling the kingdoms of Punjab, Kashmir, Sistan, Kabulistan, Sindh, and Gujarat, is a mighty one, with a strong culture and even stronger warriors. There are, nonetheless, yet more creatures in the dark to fear. Kagan Kerman, the wolf of the United Areas Cognate, albeit his life is soon to end, is one of them. The point here being that even with a great empire, it only takes one not-so-great emperor to cast it all into nothing. If the descending Zunbil emperors can rule with the wisdom of Zun, they may yet find themselves in power for centuries to come, but time will tell what happens. For now, this video comes to an end as we observe the greatness of the Kara Kerman culture, a culture which might sound Turkish to the untrained ear, but is in reality a hybrid of Norse and Mordvin culture, which is probably one of the most obscure culture combos that I've seen from the AI. We also have Franco-Maghrebi off in Paris, just about 900 and some years too early, but based nonetheless. We see a new cadet branch of the Idrisids, the Rumen, coming to power here, and I'm sure the Zaidi influence over Europe will only continue in the face of this empire. West Slavia is ruled by a Pomeranian pagan of the Germanic variety, which is very confusing, but checks out, I guess. And we can't forget the rabbinic Jews of Schleswig-Holstein. Finally, the once Norse, once Pict, once Scottish, once Galo-Norse, once God knows what else Norse, Empire of Britannia is now ruled by a non-Ivaring of Cornish descent. Gotta let every British culture have a turn on the throne, I guess. We see in Africa, the Coptic faith has mostly won out, pushing the pagans out of sub-Saharan Africa alongside Ibadi Islam, and of course, the Zunbil Empire is thriving. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Consider becoming a channel member so your name can be an inspiration for other things in the future campaigns. And whether you're a member or not, let me know how you felt about some of the renamings we did in-game, as this is the first CK3 video using the member renaming system. I'm still quite open to changing up how we handle it. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your time.